This is Middle Tennessee Electric's Plugged In podcast. This podcast focuses on the world of electric vehicles. It is for all EV enthusiasts, whether you are an early adopter and have been driving an EV for years, or you're just starting your research. This podcast is for you.
Hello, I'm Brandon Wagner.
And I'm Amy Byers, and welcome to Middle Tennessee Electric's Plugged In podcast. So Brandon, last week we took a look back at season 1. Some of the clips that we thought were kind of stand out, and we didn't get through. There were a lot of them. So we're going to continue that today with part 2 of the season 1 recap.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So now we're going to go to episode 11, where we did a spotlight on a Ford F-150, and we interviewed 2 of our EV Car Club members who had just gotten their Ford Lightnings, TJ Lewis and Lee Moore.
Yeah, and here we were specifically asking them about the bidirectional charging and powering your house from your truck, which is a function you can do, but there's certain specifications that you have to know about if that's something you're interested in.
So I've got the extended battery in the Lariat. It does have the Pro Power on it. It does have the ability to hook into your house to power it. The thing that you don't find out up front about it is it's about $10,000 to add the transfer switch and everything that you need, plus the installation, to be able to power your house.
The equipment you need on your house.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and so they partner with a vendor called Sunrun, and they come out and do the installation, but the quotes are around 10 grand. Depending on if they don't have to run a lot of wire.
Right.
So I'm curious now. The charger you got has the ability, if you paid the extra to do it, right?
So the charger, I got the Pro charger with the extended battery, and so you do have the option to tie that into the home integrator kit, I think they call it, to be able to charge the house. On the extended range battery, they say you can go for 3 days. The nice thing is I've got plugs in the front and I've got plugs in the back. And so when my neighbor Don and I were installing a 50 amp charging outlet for my truck, because I tried the 110, wasn't going to work for me, right? We plugged in my saltwater aquarium. We had a TV, Apple TV, and I think it took us a little longer than we may want to admit. But it used less than 1% of the battery to run all that, plus the internet for the house to be able to watch the games. So,
I have the Pro, which has the standard range battery, the smaller available battery size, and it does not offer the ability to have bidirectional charging with the Ford Pro charger.
And so one thing I keep hearing is that these Pro chargers are 80 amp rated.
they are.
But you don't have to put 80 amp service in there. Is that
You
correct?
don't. So there are 7 different settings on the Pro charger. It's all behind the cover, so it's not like you flip a switch on the outside or you're worried about that. But you can do up to 80 amps, or there's incrementals that you can go down. My house was built in 2021. It's got 200 amp service to the house, 100 amp to the garage panel, which powers most of the house outlets, except for like the range. I've had several electricians come out to try to quote what it would take to install it. And every one of them is concerned about trying to put 80 amps on it. They think we can get away with putting 50 amps, 60 at the most. But when you're talking about all electric utility or appliances, 100 amps doesn't go a long way with water heaters and different things. So I charge at night on the Pro charger. I've been able to set a time. So my time is 11 to 6 a.m., 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. That way I'm not taking showers in the middle of the night, right? So I can maximize the charging efficiency.
Amy, in episode 12, we interviewed Robert White about his Mustang Mach-E and his reaction to long-term ownership.
Yeah, and while we had him, we had heard, I think we filmed this maybe in the spring, early spring, maybe even in February. And we had been hearing a lot of people talk about how in the winter they really saw their battery life decline, with the colder temperatures. So we really wanted to talk to him about seasonal driving because he had his Mach-E through all the seasons and kind of how he felt the seasons affected his battery life.
That is so true. Driving in the winter in EVs, you have to make an adjustment. You just have to. It's just no way around it. What people forget with EVs is that every single thing you do in that car can drain that battery. Right. Everything from windshield wipers to music to everything you do affects your range. And so with EV, but folks use cold weather driving as a criticism for EVs. They don't realize it also affects gas vehicles as well. It's just that it affects them differently, and the way they utilize the waste and everything, it warms, right. And so they forget that. But if they look at the research, it shows they get less range in the winter with gas vehicles as well. It's just that you don't feel it as much because everything you do in an EV is affecting the range of your battery. But the range does go down, and you have to learn to adjust. I went to Memphis on a road trip in January last year. And when I left on that Friday, it was 55, 60 degrees here. I made it all the way to Jackson, no problem. Probably could have made it to Memphis. The next day coming back, it was 25 degrees. I had to stop in Jackson. I just got to Franklin and had to recharge in Franklin, Electrify America, and then come home. And so you have to learn to adjust in winter driving. Now, It's not bad. It didn't take much adjusting. It just meant I had to make one additional stop. So it's just getting used to it.
Amy, our next clip comes from episode 14 where MTE launches the NiteFlex rate, and we interviewed Cindy Lane.
Cindy is our CFO, and she had a team that put together this NiteFlex rate. So I actually had some questions for her and you. So this is a little bit of a longer clip, but there was just so much information that I felt like it needed to be repeated. So we'll go to the clip.
So the NiteFlex rate is a time of use rate that will provide savings to our members if they can actually shift some of their energy use from what we call on-peak times when energy prices are the highest, to off-peak times. We want to encourage EV owners in particular to charge their vehicles overnight. And so the new NiteFlex rate actually has a savings between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. So basically the way it works, the basic service charge will be exactly the same as any other residential member, $21.75 a month. These members will pay an extra penny during the on-peak hours from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. But once 10 p.m. kicks in and they go to 4 a.m., they have a 3 cent per kilowatt hour savings. So that's very exciting. We think they can save money.
So especially if I know like dishwashers, I know you can program to start, later at night. So if you could, maybe do that.
In addition to
your EV.
To this,
yes. I mean, there's other things. Maybe wait to do, maybe before you go to bed, throw your clothes in the dryer. Maybe do something like that. So you could really add on to that and really see some potential savings. Does this rate apply only to EV chargers or to the whole house?
No, this rate applies to the whole house. So everything that you're powering from the meter at your home. So really, anything that you can shift to this off-peak time from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., you'll save 3 cents a kilowatt hour.
Right.
Yeah.
So that it just kind of compounds that savings as the more things you can figure out to do. So that is good. Yes. So Brandon, I'm going to turn to you now, and I've got a few questions for you. And Cindy, as chime in if you have something to add to it. So the first one is for a typical EV owner, how much money can they save each year by using this rate? And I know it's hard to say because you just don't know what people's lifestyles are and how people live. But for just on average, your typical person.
I think, speaking in generalities, the first thing we need to look at is just on this normal rate that we have. If you were to stay on that and you drove, let's say, 12,000 miles a year, I only expect people to spend about $400 a year to charge their vehicles if they do all their charging at home. And so, obviously, if you drive more, you're going to spend more and that sort of thing. But I've got an EV and I calculate everything. I throw everything in Excel, right? My mile per gallon equivalent is over 92 right now. So just keep in mind that it's a very cost-effective mode of transportation, and our rates are super low as they are. So there's only $400 a year that we're trying to save you money on. So obviously, if you can move some more appliances and stuff off peak, you can probably save more. But our goal is to try to take that $400 and give some of that back to our members in a way that is really easy to follow. What I love about what Cindy's done with this rate is it's a set it and forget it rate. It's the same hours every day, 365 days a year. So if you can set your car and you can save some of that $400 that you're projected to spend, then why not do it and save yourself some money?
So Brandon, I actually interviewed you in episode 16. We were talking about understanding bidirectional and two-way charging. And you brought up an interesting concept that you think might be down the road on how the bidirectional charging can help when demands are high.
Yes. Okay. So I like to think of it in steps, right? Our step one is the rate that we talked about. We're going to try to move as much charging as possible to overnight when our grid demand is very, very low. As adoption increases, that might actually move that overnight demand up a little bit. And so step two might be more of a managed charging where we incentivize folks to participate in a cloud management system. You can still have your car fully charged when you get behind the wheel, but we try to flatten that load in the cloud. All this technology is out there, it's available, it's just not cost effective right now.
Right.
So step three would be when we get to a point, and then maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, but when we're incurring high demand and maybe we're even asked by TVA, you have to shed some of your load, instead of having to turn people off, if we can work with our members and incentivize them to power their home from their vehicles, then we keep everybody's lights on, it keeps our costs down. It just increases our system load factor, which reduces our cost, which benefits our entire membership, and it also prevents us from having to build all this extra infrastructure for just that small, severe weather time that we hit every 5 years or something like that. In episode 17, Understanding Microgrids, we interviewed Avery Ashby about the microgrid that he helped install at our Lebanon office. And I know this episode wasn't EV specific, but this is all about grid resiliency, and I think it was really interesting. I think that our EV members are going to be really interested in it.
Yeah, so usually with a microgrid, when you think about them, the standard way, you're usually thinking about it from a campus style perspective, right? So you see those at some university campuses or military bases or even business parks. And as those systems kind of, as the systems kind of mature, you're seeing other use cases like in emergency response centers that maybe some cities have, even some hospital complexes. So a microgrid, you usually think of multiple buildings and the interconnection between those. I would probably say what we've got in Lebanon is a nanogrid, and I hate to use it's a marketing term, but it's the same components, but scaled down to just maybe one building. And that's what we did at Lebanon. At our Lebanon office, we already had power coming from the grid. We already had a generator there. What we did in this project, we added PV, we added a battery system. We also had to add new switch gear that can control those and control the load. So we have electrically operated breakers. And then of course that microgrid controller that I talked about that centrally manages all those systems.
So when you're saying PV, you're
Yes.
talking about the solar panels we have
That's
out
right.
there. Just
yeah, out
for
there,
those that
that's right.
may not. Yeah.
So we have about 60 kW worth of solar there at the site. It comes back into the main switchgear as well, and that microgrid controller will watch how much energy that's producing and look at the load of the building, and then also with the battery system, and it just manages the whole system.
So when I think about what you're describing, I'm comparing that to just having a generator. You said we already had a generator there, so I'm curious, what does this? Is it just for reliability? Like, how is a microgrid different from just having a generator?
Yeah, so what you're talking about there is for backup power, right? So, and you're right. So before we had the microgrid, basically when the power went down, the ATS there, the automatic throwover switch there, would sense that the grid's off, it would fire up the generator, wait till it come up to speed, and then basically the generator would pick up the building. Now that we've got a battery system with a microgrid there, our battery is our first priority to go over to. And since it's inverter based or power electronics based, it can do this much quicker. I mean, we've seen switching over to like a quarter of a second. Now we've backed that off a little bit just to help, make sure things are stable there. But in 1 to 2 seconds, the microgrid would recognize that the grids went down and switch it over to the battery system, and the battery is now picking up the whole building. And it'll run off the battery, and the size of our battery can last about 2.5 hours at full load if the battery's fully charged. And of course, our outages don't typically last that long, so it's also, not only did it monitor when the grid went down, but it's monitoring the health of the grid. Hey, I see that the grid's back and it's been healthy now for a couple minutes. I'm going to switch back over to the grid, and it does that all automatic. So, and the first one that I mentioned, so if a car hits a pole out on the street or something and the power goes off, we do have an open transition, right? We'll see the voltage go down, and we chose to have an open transition so the people in the building still sees that blink, but just for that 1 or 2 seconds, and then we're on battery. But the beauty is when it comes back on the grid's healthy, it sees, all right, it's healthy, and it will sync up and do a closed transition. So if you're in the building, you wouldn't know if I'm still on battery or back on the grid.
Okay, so Brandon, we made it through the recap of season 1, and now we're excited to move to season 2.
Yeah, I can't believe we're doing a season 2, and we just want to say a special thank you to all of those who have been listening to season 1. Amy, I've told you stories about I'll be out and about, and somebody will ask me, "Aren't you that guy from the podcast?" And it's incredibly humbling. Mm-hmm. So thank you to all of you who've listened, and I hope that we're going to continue to bring you content that's relevant and important to you. We're going to do our best to do that.
So I really want to reiterate what Brandon has said. We are definitely humbled by the support we have received for the season 1 of Plugged In Podcast, and are very excited about season 2. And we are definitely committed to making sure we're bringing you informative and interesting topics. And if there are certain topics that you want to hear about, email us, evcarclub@mte.com. We really want to make sure that we're having content that is relevant and stuff you want to hear about. So in our next episode, it's going to be the official start of season 2. And I have to say, I'm going to do a little shameless plug, Brandon, because I loved filming this episode. It was so much fun, and I'm excited that this is how we're going to start season 2. And it is a visit with you and your father-in-law to at your garage, or your father-in-law's garage, to see how things are going on this conversion of the 1961 Austin Healey that you have from a gas to an electric. So you've talked about that a lot, I know, for the last few years, and just getting out there and you kind of get caught up in the excitement of it all. So make sure to tune in to that. It's going to be a really good episode. For more information on MTE's Drive EV programs or the EV Car Club, please visit driveev.com or email us at evcarclub@mte.com. Until next time, plug in, power up, and drive safe.